Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Orbit Live event. This is a really exciting one. We're being joined by Joe Abercrombie and Brent Weeks, who you can hopefully see on your screen in front of you. Joe Abercrombie is the author of several series, most recently the Age of Madness trilogy. The first book in that series, A Little Hatred, came out last fall and is out later this month in paperback. The sequel, The Trouble with Peace, will be out on September 15th, so if you haven't already picked up A Little Hatred, you've still got time to catch up before book 2 comes out. Brent Weeks is the author of the Night Angel trilogy and the Lightbringer series. The last volume of the Lightbringer series, The Burning White, also came out last fall, and it's available in paperback today in the US. If you click on that green button that says Buy Brent and Joe's Books, you'll be directed to retailer links for those new paperbacks in both the US and the UK. We're going to kick things off today with a conversation between Joe and Brent, and then they'll be answering your questions. I see that some of you have already entered questions, which is great. The rest of you can click on that Ask a Question button to get a pop-up and enter your own. You can also vote on others' questions so the most popular ones get answered first. Don't forget to subscribe to Orbit Live on Crowdcast to be notified about other upcoming events. Both Brent and Joe have other virtual events coming up soon. And now I'm thrilled to turn things over to Joe and Brent.
Marvelous. Well, I'll start because I'm the more important one of us.
Of course.
But I want to ask you a question, Joe. It seems like you've published a lot of books. I mean, for an epic fantasy author, I think, what is it, like 12 books in the past 12, 14 years, something like that? That seems really fast, like unreasonably so. Do you feel your quality has slipped?
I mean, the quality only improves immensely with every release. That's what my mother tells me.
Okay. Wait, you let your mother read your books?
Oh, she's the first person to read them. Most of the real violence and unpleasantness, comes from her originally. She always wants me to dial it up. Give us a little more. I think I've written. How many have I written? 7 First Law books published now, and 3 Shattered Sea ones. So 10 novels and a collection of short stories. But the 12th is out next month. Yeah, so 12. Okay. It's 12 in. Well, I started writing them maybe 2000, so I cheated, which is what I try to always do as much as possible. Of course, I had a sort of big head start. I started writing in 2001. The first book wasn't published till 2006, I think. So it seems like kind of one a year, but it's probably a good deal slower than that. I mean, 1.5 to 2 years per book is generally. It doesn't feel fast to me. Right. I must say, it feels kind of like a painstaking grind. Right. How about you? Where are you up to now? You must be at 7-ish.
This is 8. Yeah, this is pretty much 8, and then a small thing or 2. But like I always try to write shorter books. Every time I go, you know what? I really need to make this shorter because when I started, my books were about 150,000 words. About how long are your books?
Well, I mean, I think the Blade itself was maybe 190, and then I got to maybe 240 with the Last Argument of Kings, which is about the longest. Generally, they've been around there, and I totally sympathise with you because Best Served Cold, after writing 240, I was kind of, that's too long. Yeah. Let's pull this back. I'll aim for 150 to 175, and that was what the treatment specified to the publisher. And then Best Served Cold ended up at 235 or something. Okay. And then the Heroes was maybe 200, and then finally with Red Country I got down to 170, 180, which was sort of what I've been aiming for all along, which feels a little more comfortable. But you've written some beasts, right? Yes, they got fatter. So I got into this cycle where I was like, okay, I can do a book every 2 years, and that feels incredibly slow. Like you have other professional authors look at you like you don't have a book coming out this year. Are you trying to commit career suicide? Really? And so you get this little tightness in your chest. I don't know if you've ever had that, but it was a friend of mine. All the time. I've got it now.
Exactly. And so I went from these books that it took me 2 years to write that were like 150 to 175,000 words. And then I was writing books that were 200, 250, 300. And then this last book was 397,000 words. So it's like writing books that are twice as long on the same time frame, and it was like, oh man, this is this is rough. So this time, I'm not going to write a book that is that long. But you're in the middle of a series right now. Is that right? And where are you at with the second and third? Is it of 3 or is it a bunch more?
It's of 3, and I'm in the rare, delightful position of having all 3 written now. I mean, the second one's out in a month, so it's a good thing that one's finished.
right.
But it's that's completely done, obviously, and then the third one is kind of at a tight sort of third draft. It's gone for its line edit, its detailed edit, but we're kind of leaving the finishing off till the second one's been out, and we can gauge some of the reaction, and I can read it with fresh eyes.
I see. So you're doing the thing that I've long suspected certain people do, which is like put it out and then you just troll the fan sites and you look at the Reddit threads and you find the really good ideas and you go, oh, that's great. I like that one. I was really stuck on what to do with that character, and so you just plug that in, right? I mean, I assume that's what you're saying.
I would never do that kind of thing, Brent. I mean, my ideas are brought to me from the muse.
Oh.
I wouldn't need to troll fan sites from. Maybe my mum would have
a nice
suggestion to make or two. Yeah,
but
I think
go ahead.
I had
Sorry.
this awkward situation with this book that I wrote a lot about populism and sort of popular uprisings, riots and revolts, and including, believe it or not, statues being toppled. I know.
Naturally.
And then all this recent set of events, just feels so on the nose.
Right.
That I've had to sort of tinker with things a little bit to, change the perception slightly. And so I'm just aware there's no point in locking a book down until you really, really have to.
So you're just vacationing for the next year? Is that?
I may start something new, but I haven't decided yet. Reading.
This is where that comes in. I bet you have something super secret that's going on. Maybe in the West Coast of America, southern West Coast.
Stuff I can't discuss, unfortunately.
Oh yeah,
can't discuss, but hugely exciting. Hugely
exciting. Yes. I mean,
it could be angina. Could be indigestion, could be excitement. It's hard to tell. I've had it for about 15 years now.
I think that's part of their career. I think they hand you, they hand you your contract. You hand them your soul. They give you the check, and then they also give you
a packet of Xanax.
Angina. Yes, exactly. Well, I suppose we should probably. We said we would answer some fan questions, so. Do you want to
just tell me quickly before you have finished your latest series? It's a trade paperback that's just out. Do you have something new cooking then yourself? Because I mean, you must have finished that book some time ago, right?
Yes. So today is my little paperback book birthday, and that's the Lightbringer series is finished now. So that was 5 books, which took me 10, 11 years. And now I'm going back to the Night Angel world, and I'm not yet telling fans exactly how I'm doing that, but it's hugely exciting. I'm
getting that feeling.
Exactly. I mean, I know you'll want to save space on your shelves that I see behind you. So because
I have a special, the W's I always leave.
Right. Right down by the floor. Open. Right. So you can kick those every time you go by. Yeah.
How is it going back to that world? How does it feel? I mean, what's the? Is it good to go back, or does it feel weird?
It's a mixed bag, honestly. Like mostly, it feels awesome because I do have some crossover characters, and it's like, oh, I've missed writing you. You're fun, and some of those things they're already done. So I usually have this long period of angst at the beginning of a book, where I sit there and I'm working every day, but nothing is showing up on the page, and I feel like I'm actually accomplishing nothing. So I didn't have that this time, which is very nice. So there's some beautiful things about going back and having a lot of the world building done, and yet having enough freedom because I'm starting in a different area in the world, a little bit different time, and that sort of thing. But there are things that and you'll have to tell me if you ever ran into this, of there are some decisions I made early in my career when I was making up this world, and today I would make different decisions. And so it's like, so it's like, ooh, I'm kind of stuck with this thing because I established this, and I'm bored with that now. I mean, or my aesthetic has changed in the last 20 years from when I first made this up. So there's a little bit of like, crap. Did you ever have that?
Absolutely, and I mean, I obviously wrote very like you. I wrote the series of my heart, if you like, the thing that had always been on my mind to write, and then went away and tried something else, and then came back to that world. And I think coming back to the world felt great. There was that familiarity there. There was all that material to draw on, the characters, the history, the geography that I didn't have to, devise from scratch. But you do have the sort of limitations of what's there already that you've got to get straight, and all the details you need to get straight. And if you keep it within living memory, then there's relationships and sort of past experiences of the characters to get right. So you win some, lose some. But it's nice, I think you're right that you've got to try doing different things. You don't want to just become that guy who does those books, and that's it. You just do, I wouldn't want to end up doing 25 Logan Nine Fingers books at the end of my career. You want to do other stuff too. Right.
Even though fans would probably ask you to do that. Yes, of course.
They'd be wonderful books, don't get me wrong, but it's nice to try other stuff too.
So just to ignore the fan questions for one more minute.
The little people will wait.
How do you feel about the expositional burdens of coming back to a world where you've written before, and you're like, do you try to write it so that people can pick up the book and they don't know anything about the world, and they can start here with Joe Abercrombie, who's polished, more polished than he was when he was a young buck, but at the same time, you're having to deal with fans who've read everything like 12 times and they know everything. And like, how do you deal with some of those expositional problems, or do you just ignore them?
Whether you'll succeed or not, I guess is different for every reader, and every reader's got a different balance of desires in that sense. But I suppose I try to make every book comprehensible for a new reader. And I've always liked books that kind of dump you into a world and don't necessarily start at the beginning, but start in the middle of events with a lot of past, both of the current characters and of the world that just kind of appears over time. And so I guess with a later book, the feeling you want is that those events of the past feel real and natural, whether you've read those books or not. You have that stuff to draw on, but you try not to make it center stage. You try just to make it the texture of the world that's kind of naturally there. And hopefully, I mean, people who read all my books always say you've got to read all of them. You've got to read all of them. But I know of lots of people who've started, in the middle with one book or another, and then have gone back, and it still works, I think. If you're going to like the books anyway, then I think they generally will work regardless. But my advice is always just buy them all. Just buy them. And then,
you're going to want them all anyway, right? So might as well just have them sitting there.
Copies to give to your friends and all that.
Okay, so here let's jump on one of these questions.
Let's talk to some of these guys.
Okay, what is your opinion on the hero's journey, and do you use it in any way to tell your stories? And if you do, how do you approach it? And if you don't, wow, this is a multi-part question. If you don't, how do you lay out a structure for your stories, characters, and themes? I'll hand that to you.
Will you indeed? The hero's journey. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a kind of anti-hero's journey guy. I mean, generally, I'm assuming we're talking about the classic kind of story structure.
Like the Joseph Campbell kind of heroes with a thousand faces kind of stuff.
I'm massively familiar with myself. I mean, I didn't kind of study any of those things. I mean, I often think of those as screenwriting things in a way more than book things, but they obviously apply to story generally. And I never did any kind of structured education in writing, as some people do. I mean, a lot of fantasy authors don't, of course. So it's not something I'm hugely familiar with. And I just sort of followed my nose when I started writing and sort of came to my own conclusion about how to do things and how to structure things. And it's kind of just a messy process of reading stuff, thinking stuff, writing a lot of handwritten notes to just work through the characters and the ideas that I have, and then starting to plan in more detail. And these days I try to get writing quite early and to just feel what the writing's like, what the characters feel like, what the dialogue feels like, and that process of actually just getting the texture of the writing is very important, and sort of getting the voice of the characters is always very important for me. So they talk about, pantsers and planners. Not sure I really believe in that dichotomy, but I'm somewhere between.
Right.
I like to plan stuff, but I also like to get writing and see how it feels, and then really fix it later. I tend to go through a first draft rapidly and then go back and revise a lot, and it's in the revision that I think I start to boil it down and get something that makes better sense. So that's the process, though that has very little to do with the hero's journey, so sorry about that.
No, you're the hero, so that's your journey. There we go. Fixed. I'm kind of stuck between a plotter and a pantser as well. I didn't study all the structure. I was actually afraid of studying the structure for a long time. I think I thought if I studied all these like formulas, then I would write formulaic fiction, which I think was a misplaced fear. But I had it. I was like, if I do it exactly the way you're supposed to, it'll look like just like every Hollywood movie that I've ever watched, and it'll be like that. It would sap the creativity. And I think that was just, one of my many neuroses. And so instead, what I do is I get into the writing however I can. It usually takes me longer than I'd like, and then I'm just really willing to revise. And like generally, it's like we've all experienced enough media, we've read enough books that you can tell when something isn't working. And so I go, look, if I write something, even if it's wonderful, if it's not working, I'm going to cut it. And like holding on to that as a point of pride, even at this point in my career, it's like I had this big long section in the final book of The Burning White. I had this huge long section, and it was what the character would have needed to do, and it's this multi-point of view fantasy, but it took a lot of time, and it screwed up the pacing of the book, and so like I made it really artful. I did all these things with it. I had the character face different kinds of danger. I built it in a dozen different ways, and finally I was reading this book on King, which Henry was it? It might have been the fifth, and the book talked about everything he had to do to finance his war. He was going to go invade France or something, right? And it was all boring. Like coming up with the money, coming up with all these things. And I was like, this is actually what my character is doing, and it has the same problem. It's a very different kind of novel, than what readers signed up for, and the pacing sucks for this character. So I ended up throwing away 100,000 words. I just said, it's just got to go. I chunked it. I threw it out. It worked, but it didn't work for this series. And I sort of said, Kip goes in, he does this, and this. It was a long day, and I did that in a dozen little ways, but I just sort of said that wasn't working for this book. It was fine. It was a good piece of fiction. I could have gotten away with it at this point in my career, but it's like, it's not working. So I'm willing to do that later if I have to, instead of earlier, which would be nice if I wouldn't waste all that time. But yeah, I sort of, you pay for it one way or the other, I guess.
Cutting is the king, isn't it? Really, cutting is the most important tool in the writer's toolbox. I find. There's nothing better than looking at a chapter and thinking, you know what, I'm just going to cut this, or at least I'm going to cut this whole section, this whole paragraph. Sometimes when you're trying hard to make something work, the answer's just so simple.
Yeah,
it doesn't. Right. Get rid. Always see what happens if it just goes completely.
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to hold on to this as a point of pride. When I need to cut it, even if it hurts really bad, I'm going to cut it. So that's, I muddle through. And these days I read a lot more writing books, and I'm not intimidated by them. But I still think I'm making it up with every book I do. Each book is hard in its own way, is how I experience things.
Oh yeah, each book's its own challenge. That's what I didn't realize when I kind of finished my first trilogy and went on to write something else. I assumed I'd just get better and better at this, and it'd become easier and easier.
Yeah.
And of course, then I found new characters, new settings, new approaches mean new challenges, and you just learn that lesson that you'll always feel pretty much off balance and like you don't know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, you have those days where you're like, dang, I'm so good, this is amazing, and then you have the days where you're like, I'm lost, I'm a fraud, this is not going to work, I'm done. Or at least I do. I'm
getting that feeling here again.
Right now.
So I'm seeing a question that is related to this one, which is, for both authors, have you ever cut characters or storylines from your novels because they didn't fit the story, but wish you could have kept in? If so, can you give us an example? So, I mean, is there anything else that you've cut? Have you cut whole people? Have you cut whole concepts from books before? Do you cut a lot? I mean, do you start with a big loose draft and hack away at it, or are you very tight in what you write?
I'm usually pretty. I usually have exact things that each chapter needs to accomplish, and I know what that needs to accomplish. So when I find, I usually go the other way. It's like, okay, instead of cutting characters, I'll be like, I'm going to combine these two characters because that makes them more interesting. So I might need to cut certain pieces of what they did because they already belonged in the chapter that they were in, or in the chapters that they were in. And I'll be like, can I make them do both of these things? Because that gives me more nuanced and deeper characters. So obviously that one where I cut 100,000 words, that was painful. I kind of wish I could have kept it in, but I totally made the right choice. Have you ever cut like a big chunk or an entire character?
Yeah, I mean, I would say very similar to you. That was it. The answer you gave is very close to what I gave. I mean, I tend to plan each part that I write quite carefully as I begin, and I'll have it broken down into 10 or 11 chapters. And if you're writing multi-point of view where you alternate the points of view, generally you won't have masses of stuff that's extraneous completely. Usually a chapter is serving a purpose that I've got to do one way or another.
Right.
Like you with secondary characters, often I'll think, can I combine this person with that person and therefore make a more interesting, more significant character rather than dozens of extras, which I always have a problem with producing too many people, too big a cast. But I rarely cut huge chunks. I mean, I cut a lot and I revise a lot on a sort of sentence and paragraph level. And I prune away in little ways, but I don't tend to cut big chunks.
Right.
And often I'll add a few scenes at the kind of first edit. So my first draft will be kind of loose and messy, then I'll chop it down and get a much tighter second draft, and then often in the second draft I'll realise, okay, I need to flesh this out a bit, or I need to add an extra scene there, or this character needs to be doing something more significant. So it's often, rather than cutting hugely at that stage, it's building it up a bit more, cutting details and cutting repetition, but try to kind of build up more of the central thing. So yeah, I mean, I've never done anything like you described with that 100,000 words. I don't have kind of trunks full of cut material or half-written novels waiting to go. I'm pretty structured, and if I write a chapter, it just tends to stay.
Yeah. I ran into this thing. I think Stephen King said something like the second chapter is the first chapter minus, or sorry, the second draft is the first draft minus 10% or something. And I'm always like, I end up going the opposite direction. I must be doing it wrong.
Right.
Like it's like, okay, that works, but I need to fill that out, or there's more drama that I can squeeze out of those scenes if I build up this and this and like tie it in thematically and so forth. So yeah.
So it's kind of your second draft is your first draft minus 10% plus 10%.
Yes,
that's what mine tends to be. It ends up roughly the same length, but hopefully with tighter, better stuff in it.
Yeah. I end up adding. I always end up. It ends up being longer, and I've had my editors say, add more, and I'm like, this book is already kind of too long. Add more. Okay, well, here's another 30,000 words. All right. All right. What else we have here? When you started writing, did you start with fantasy right away, or did you approach different genres?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fantasy guy, really. I guess I've read all kinds of stuff, always have. I've been quite a wide reader and read all sorts of stuff. And I don't read very much fantasy these days because I find it difficult one way or another to sort of lose myself in it. It feels too much like work. But as a kid in my teens and my kind of up until the age of about 20, I read just loads of fantasy, and I played a lot of role-playing games. And so fantasy was always the thing that was personal for me and close to my heart. And when I thought about writing, which I did from time to time, it was always a fantasy, my take on the kind of fantasy trilogy, my take on Lord of the Rings, that was the thing I imagined writing, and people sometimes say, why don't you try something else? Why don't you try sci-fi or whatever? Right. It just doesn't. I love sci-fi. I love reading it.
Yeah.
I like reading crime. I like reading. It's like with cuisine. When you might love Chinese food, you love pizza, you love curries, all huge broad range of taste. But if you're opening a restaurant, it behooves you to pick one, right? And so my feeling's always been, fantasy's my area. I never thought really about writing in another genre. Maybe the day will come, but it hasn't. It hasn't yet. And fantasy is such a broad church. You can write all kinds of stories within it. And I have dabbled with doing that. I've kind of written a western in fantasy clothes, and I've written a war story in fantasy clothes. So why would I go and write a western when I can do it in fantasy? So, How about you? Have you dabbled in anything else?
When I first started, I always wanted to write fantasy. So it was from, I think I started my first novel when I was 13 years old or something. And promptly saw how bad it was and stopped. Well, not promptly, but eventually I saw how bad it was and I stopped. I sort of dabbled in. I wanted to keep writing after college. I was like, how can I keep writing after college? And so I applied to some MFA programs and wrote some really pretentious stuff to try to get into an MFA
and that didn't
program.
work.
And I got shortlisted at the University of Iowa Writers Program, which ultimately rejected me, which was really good for me. So I'm so glad they rejected me, because it was like, well, what I was writing was my writing sample for them was like me trying to prove I was smart or something, and like, oh, we don't need more writers doing that. There's quite enough of that, out there. So then I returned to my first love, which is fantasy. I mean, I could imagine writing other stuff, but generally when I read something else, it's like I read a crime writer, and it's like, oh, these guys are really good at what they do, and this is so lean and tight, and they've got their research done so well that things just fit in really well. It's like, dang, I would have to study for 2 or 3 years just to get all the background to be able to do this, but like I really like what they do, and bravo for them. It's like I don't really want to do that, even though I could learn a ton in my writing from them and try to. So like sometimes I think of things like, I got this idea for this family drama that I'll write when I'm an old guy or something. But like, who wants to read a family drama from Brent Weeks? I don't know. So
there is there's the gravity, isn't there, as well as there's the commercial aspect. I mean, people, it's not about the money in that sense, but selling books is part of the metric on which you judge whether you've done something worthwhile or not. You want to be read,
Sure.
And once you've got an audience for a certain kind of book, it becomes very hard to take that chance of knowing you'll sell a quarter as many books, a tenth as many books, whatever it may be. In a way, you've got to start from scratch again, and that's a tough thing to do when drag yourself some distance.
I faced that with Lightbringer, because it was so different from Night Angel. When I start over, people are like with the first book, they're kind of like, okay, well, this is really different. Like, I didn't want to pick this up because it didn't have ninjas on the cover or something. And then even after the first book, I had people say, so are you going to return to Night Angel? And then eventually I won people over, but it took a while, and it took it's like asking readers to take a leap of faith with you. Like, hey, It's going to be different, but trust me, and that's that's within fantasy. I mean, I imagine if I start writing Southern mysteries or something, it's like, really. But mostly you're right. I think fantasy is a broad church. I can do a ton of things within this genre. I have a ton of freedom and I love it. I already love it. So I don't feel pressure to stay within my lane or something. I feel like this lane is really wide. so I'm really thankful for that.
And fantasy readers, I think, it can be often a slow builder, a kind of career in genre, a career in fantasy. It can take time to win people over and produce stuff and get a following. But once you have a following, I think they tend to be pretty loyal. Literary fiction is full of people having a massive book and then flaming out instantly and their career's over within 6 months. It's a really ruthless world by comparison with genre, where perhaps the pace is slower and the build is slower, but the chances of having a long career are better, I think.
Right. I've always thought of, or for a long time, I thought of, you kind of give the side eye to the people in YA. It's like, oh, well, that's where all the huge money is, and I've talked since to people who had huge books, #1 bestsellers, and then it's like, but there's no fan loyalty to the author. It's like people are interested in the project, and then that can go huge, and they become a huge deal, and then their next project nobody's interested in, and I'm like, well, that's terrifying. It's like, okay, one huge check is lovely. I'm sure that's great, but like, I'm a writer. I want to keep sharing with people. Like what I think this year is different than what I thought 5 years ago. I have different things I want to write about, and the idea of flaming out is terrifying. So I'm so thankful that in fantasy people are like, oh, it's a Brent Weeks book. Oh, it's a Joe Abercrombie book. I know I'm going to get something good off of this, or so you can build up a readership, which is amazing about our genre. So all right, let's see. What questions do we want to abuse next?
So what's the first thing about the book you need to start writing it? As in character setting, theme, plot, etc. So when you're planning, I suppose with your first book, it's often something that's been kind of building in the mind for years. Has been fermenting. My characters for the first law went back, decades in some cases, and there were ideas I'd stolen from all over the place during the years that I'd been alive. But if you're starting something new, so not the Night Angel necessarily, but more with the Lightbringer stuff, when you were starting something new, what was the kind of seed for that idea, if there was one?
It's always a lot of things, but I think for me it's usually something that troubles me, like I was reading books about the Italian Renaissance, and I was Renaissance history books, and thinking of the divided loyalties that people would have. Like so a woman would marry into a family. Well, she's supposed to be loyal to her new family, but she's still really loyal to her old family, right? Because that's where she grew up. She's also got loyalties to her city. She's got loyalties loosely to her country, her overlord, whoever that is. She's supposed to have loyalty to God, and then she's also supposed to have loyalty to the church. And all of those might be in line, or they might all be pulling her in different ways. And so part of what I wanted to look at was loyalties. I wanted to look at, are there different ethical rules for kings, for rulers? Like, they get to do things that normal people don't. How do we feel about that? So it'll be things like that, like looking at being an insider, being an outsider. It's kind of issues that bother me about integrity, about lying, about secrets within a family. So it'll be a host of things that bother me that I think are not easy questions, and then I'll get to explore them through the fantasy. So that's how Lightbringer probably started.
That's fascinating. So you're in a way you're starting with theme. In a way, which is exactly what I wouldn't do. I'd go the exact opposite way. I tend to start with, not that I'm saying you're wrong, even if you are.
Right. Well, clearly I am.
I'd start with characters, almost always. Start with the people for some reason, and maybe the setting, and then the theme is very much something that kind of just is emergent for me, if it ever gets there. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's sort of a soup for me because that'll be playing on one track, and then I'll be like, okay, I want this character, and he is super powerful.
Yeah.
And can I do this thing where I have a disenfranchised character, and like, can I have two main characters, and one's completely disenfranchised outsider, and one's the ultimate insider, and can I make them cross? You know, as the series goes along. So I start with these two characters, and then they're going to engage with those themes as they go. It's just messy. It's messier than what I just said. You know, that I'll also be like, here's this cool action sequence that I just thought up. Can I fit that in somewhere? You know, can I make that necessary somewhere? Right.
It's not dissimilar with me either. I mean, you know, I think with this latest series, Age of Boundless, I mean, that had kind of been in my mind to do something in the First Law world. Obviously, I thought, what things are there that I could pick up? What would I want to develop? What would I want to do with that world to do something new? Mm-hmm. And I'd seen this amazing production of Shakespeare's Histories years before, and it was all 8 plays over 2 weekends. So you'd see 3 on a Saturday and 1 on a Sunday for 2 weeks, and it was all the same cast, a rotating cast, the same people. Okay. It was amazing. It's the kind of most impressive thing I've seen on stage. It was quite something. So Shakespeare's Histories have kind of had this impact on me. And so Henry IV, which is basically the playboy prince, disappointing prince, who has the rival of this incredibly impressive warrior prince. You know, they're kind of the yin and yang of this story. So the playboy prince is the son of a king in trouble, really. And so that was kind of the shell of the idea. And then onto that, I dropped all kinds of other nonsense. And as you say, I just tend to start with a pad and write stuff. And it's whatever comes into my head at any given time. I just find that to be a good way of becoming the sponge and then letting the ideas in, you know. And a lot of the ideas are nonsense, and then some are good. And like you say, it's like, my God, you know, a chase over a crumbling aqueduct? That'd be amazing, you know. So then you just stop worrying about how it's going to, you know, exactly how it's going to work, what the theme is, and think, where can I get the aqueducts, man?
Right. So one of the reasons I go for like why I'll think about like a theme, I guess, if you want to put it that way, is like I'll think, do I want to spend 2 years writing this book? Do you ever have that worry of like, what if I get bored with this?
Oh yeah,
or whatever. Yeah.
I think with Best Served Cold, I had terrible trouble with that book. That was my difficult second album in a way. You know, I've written the thing I wanted to write, and now suddenly I had to write something else. And so that was when I had that really terrifying thing of constantly thinking, does this work? Is this terrible? Is this going to be the end of my career? You know, is this appalling? And then I've had that feeling with every book, but because that one came together, I now at least know I will always feel like I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Right.
You know, and once you accept that you'll be in a constant state of terror,
yes,
I think that helps. Just a little bit, anyway.
Yes. There's this odd thing where I think after you've done this for enough years, you expect the terror, but you also expect it to pass. And maybe that's confidence. It's like, okay, this at some point I'm gonna feel like this book is terrible. It sucks. It's gonna be awful. It never is gonna work. I'm gonna have to start over. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I'm gonna hit that point maybe a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But then I'm gonna get past it, and I'm gonna be like, oh wait, if I put this and this together, then this, and like all of a sudden a bunch of pieces will just snap together that you had no idea were even cooking in the back of your head. And that happens to me over and over and over. So now sometimes when I get to that place of terror, I'm like, okay, I'm in the terror place. Oh, I recognize this. Oh, it's very familiar.
Oh, that wallpaper. Yes.
There we go. Yeah, this is my home. Actually, this is my office. Yes. Okay. And so I've gotten slowly to where it's. No, that was going to be a lie. I was just going to lie to all of us, including you, and say it got easier. No, it actually didn't. So I sort of feel like if you're doing this right, you're always taking new risks, and so there's always new things that could go wrong. And you're like, okay, I know how to write that kind of action sequence. I can do that in my sleep. How can I make that harder? How can I make that more interesting? Can I do something with a character I haven't seen done before, or at least that I haven't done before? And so it's always like pushing the along the knife edge a little farther to be like, I want to develop my skills. I want to try new things. So I feel like that's where the best fiction I'm able to write comes out of that place.
Oh yeah. And you said an interesting thing earlier, which is, when you were talking about the two characters, the insider and the outsider, then you swap them over. Because the fun is often in taking the fish from their water, their natural habitat, and putting them in somewhere where they're incredibly uncomfortable, right? I mean, that's what you do with the characters, and perhaps that's also sadly true as a writer. In the end, if you stay swimming in your comfortable pond,
right,
you'll produce work that is ultimately just the same and becomes dollar and dollar over time. So you've got to, if you're not in fear, then perhaps you're doomed to produce poor work. I don't know.
Right. So you said you started writing really early. How long did it take you to get published, and did you think of quitting? This is kind of Ian's question. So.
Okay. Yeah. I sort of had this. I had a lot of ideas in mind, and I can remember when I was at university, aged kind of 17 to 20. I can remember wandering around late at night, having some of these ideas in my head, turning over the characters, so characters like Logan had been around for years and years. And when I finished university at 20, I started trying to write that book as an exercise in touch typing, because I had no skills. I did a psychology degree. I had nothing to offer anyone. And so I figured I'd learned to touch type by writing my brilliant take on the fantasy novel. And it was, as you were describing, terrible, pompous, obvious, romantic, not in the sort of romantic in the romance sense, but in the sense of being lyrical and flowery and heroic,
Okay.
And so I put it aside.
You've left all that so far behind.
Well, I still have a rich vein of that, I like to think, when I need it. And then I kind of went away and worked for a while as a video editor, film editor, working on TV shows of various kinds. And then I came back to the writing in my late 20s, and it had really, changed massively. Straight away, it had more of a tongue-in-cheek kind of feel to it that I found much more. It was much more honest. It was honest, It felt like my voice rather than just me trying to do a crap version of Tolkien, I suppose.
Sure.
And so it took, straight away I found that this was interesting, and I started, writing for my own entertainment, really. And eventually had a book after 2 or 3 years, and then started trying to find an agent, and got gradually rejected. I mean, in those days, it was if you can believe this, before these things were done by email, right? So you'd have you'd put a self-addressed envelope in an envelope along with your 50 pages of manuscript or whatever, and you'd send it off. I don't know if you did this as well, but that was the sort of standard thing. You'd prepare half a dozen agents who represented your kind of author. You'd send off your applications one at a time, and after 5 or 6 weeks, you'd come home one day to find your own handwritten envelope on the mat, and you that it was a no. And so I collected maybe half a dozen of those. Nothing.
Those are rookie numbers.
Nothing that I'm bitter about. I'm not upset about it. It's no big thing, It made me the man I am, to be honest.
Yes, right.
And so, I collected a few of those, and then just by pure chance, I told a friend of mine I was writing, and he was an educational publisher. He found himself on a course with Gillian Redfern, who just started at Glance.
Okay.
And so he kind of said, "Oh, this friend of mine's written this thing. Oh God, look at it." And she was like, "Oh God, okay, I'll look at the thing." And she looked at the thing and was like, "Oh, this is surprisingly not as terrible as I thought it was going to be." Right. So she asked me to see some more, and I got an offer a week later. And I suppose it's just one of those things. So it kind of 2 or 3 years to write the first book, 6 months of rejections from agents, then just a lucky coincidence. How about you?
I had no connections to the industry. I did not weasel my way in, unlike some other author here. Jeez. Got published by his friends. We all went to Eton together, and
Harrow, mate. It was Harrow.
Oh, right. I have no idea. I did the So I was wanting to write. I got out of college. I had to make a living for myself somehow. So I got a job as a school teacher for a year and wrote nothing, and that was terrifying. because didn't really have a whole lot of time or energy after trying to teach and be good. I was trying to be a decent school teacher. I was teaching high school English, and I had no curriculum. I had to make all of it up on my own, and it didn't go well. It went great. The kids were wonderful. But I remember like one weekend I sat down and I actually had time to write, and I had nothing. Like my cup was empty, and that was, as a creative person, that was terrifying. So I got married, and my wife was like, "You need to do this." So she supported me, and she worked the day job. I made breakfast,
the kept man,
lunch, and dinner. Yeah, I was the kept man. I was the house husband. And I would write all day while she was bringing home the bacon, and so that lasted for 5 years, and quite a few times during that I was like, this is getting ridiculous. Like all of our friends were getting real jobs, and they'd have the SUV, and this is America, so you'd have the SUV, they'd get a dog, they'd own a house, and here we are living in our tiny little apartment, and it's like, man, I feel like I don't know how long you keep following a dream, because it starts having more and more real life costs, right? There's like things you can't do.
And would their friends be kind of like, "Oh, Brent, what are you still doing
the thing? Yeah, how's it going?" And how's it going with the writing thing was just a terrible question, because there was never anything to say, right? Yeah, still.
I wrote some words.
Yeah, I wrote some words. I'm still getting rejections. And so I sent out letters to about 30 agents. I'd sort of found the ones who I'd actually want to represent me, and I'm still waiting to hear back from some of those. Like some of these, they would. It was just incredibly tacky. Like some of them would just stamp. I would get a stamp on the outside of my self-addressed stamped envelope, just a stamp of rejection. Like, no, thank you. They would send it back. Like they wouldn't even open the thing, and you're just like, wow, that's
because
brutal.
You're expecting, maybe they hate it, maybe they'll despise it.
Right.
Powerful material, right? Right. But you're not ready for I could not care less. No. I can barely even be bothered to sign this statement. Right.
I'm not even going to sign it. This is this absolute form of rejection. So. Yeah, I made it through with a few agents there who were interested. Got my agent. My first choice agent actually was the last one who I had to hear from. So it was like 9 months after I had sent these out. 9 months, and then my agent, who was absolutely my first choice, Don Moss, he wanted to represent me, and I thought I had it made. And I then. It took a year. There was a guy who was interested in the meantime, I'd kept writing, of course, because that's what writers do. There was a guy who was interested in rapidly publishing the books, and I'd met with him. He was going to offer me a deal. He was putting together a package, and he got laid off. And right before he could give me the offer, which was all for the best, of course, because you don't want to be an orphan on your debut novels. So then it took me another year, and he got a job someplace else. He made some offers, and all of a sudden everybody's interested, right? So we got to deal with Orbit, and the rest is history. So, but yeah, there were tons of times where I had crises of faith of where I was like, is this worth doing? Because like it's okay for your dreams to change as you go along in your life. Like everybody wants to be a rock star, and then like some people realize, oh, that's a terrible life. And that's okay. Like my brother was, he trained in opera. He was very talented singer, and he was like, you're on the road, you travel, you stay some random place for 2 months, you go someplace else, you're there for 2 weeks, you go someplace else. It's like, how do you have a family while you're doing that? You don't. And so I had it in my mind, like this won't necessarily have a happy ending for Brent. Yeah, like this isn't the triumphal Hollywood story of like, I tried really hard, I just believed in myself all the way, and it turned out right for me. It was like, that isn't necessarily the end. It's only the end for the stories that we actually hear about. You hear from Brent because he made it, but that's survivorship bias, and I wasn't necessarily going to be that guy. So yeah, I definitely had those moments.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right.
Well,
next question.
We've got 10
go
minutes.
ahead.
We're supposedly 10 minutes. So should we try and let's try and crack through some swiftly. Quick
Sure.
fire
Okay.
round.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Do you have a specific writing ritual? What do you reckon, Brent? Do you have any rituals? You got any kind of circles of salt or things of that nature?
I've started a new thing. I've been writing out stuff longhand with a fountain pen, and that's been somehow just doing something physically gets the ideas going, and that's been wonderful. So I sort of do a first draft by hand with a great fountain pen. Feels good, and then I do the second draft, by when I'm putting it into the thing. How about you?
Not dissimilar. I mean, I find I like planning a lot on with a fountain pen, and then I kind of have a precise drawing pen for my kind of proper plans, my detailed plans that I do on squared paper with the little squares because it makes me feel clever and technical.
Sure.
But generally with the rituals, I try to avoid them because I feel like it's easy to get into this magical thinking about writing. That writing is a special, magical, amazing thing, and I try to look at it as exactly the opposite if I can, as a tedious, workman-like, banal task like building a wall or plastering.
That is the sense I get when I read your books.
Of course, that's what I'm going for. I feel as though if you look at it as magical, the day will soon come where the magic doesn't happen. Whereas if you look at it as work, there's always some element of work that you can do. And I'm a big believer in the muse visits those who are already working.
Right.
Get in front of it, just try and grapple with it, and eventually hopefully the magic will emerge from a lot of slow and tedious work.
Yeah, the muse will know where to find me because I'll be at my desk working. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's how you make it happen. We all hope there will be TV shows based on your books soon. In the meantime, have either of you read or watched The Witcher? I've played the games. I've not read or watched The Witcher. Over to you, Joe.
I have not read it, though I do, bizarrely. I've got his new one here.
Oh yeah. Okay, nice.
It's an advanced one. So
Nice,
I've read a page of that. It was a good page. Don't get me wrong. I will read more. Just haven't quite got there yet.
Yeah.
But the games likewise. The Witcher 3 is just brilliant. And I did watch the TV, and I enjoyed the TV actually. I think the problem you have with it is that everyone goes into it expecting Game of Thrones. Now I think every TV, maybe less now as it starts to dwindle into the past. When The Witcher appeared,
what?
It felt like
Game of what? It's been the cultural memory has been wiped for certain reasons.
It's a set of books by George R. R. Martin. I think they could be big.
Oh, he's fantastic. Oh, that's right. He's wonderful. Now I remember. Yeah. Yes, great writer.
So The Witcher's not Game of Thrones. It's more. It's more. I don't know what the word is really. It's much less epic. It's more kind of comedic, probably. It's a different tone. I enjoyed it once I sort of got my head around what it was going to be. I really liked it. In fact, I liked it so much I had to then play The Witcher 3 again. Because, I like that too.
Yeah. I was playing Witcher 3 and I got into all the side quests, and I do this to myself sometimes. And I did millions of side quests, and then I got sick of it. and then it was like I tried to come back to the main quest, and I'm like, what am I doing? Well, how does this game work? So I never finished it, which kills me. Because it was great game. Loved it. Okay, let's hit some others.
Yeah.
What kind of feedback? Oh, you'll like this one. What kind of feedback do you receive about your strong female characters? From Kim Morgan.
Oh, feedback about the strong female characters. Assorted feedback. I mean, the feedback is often assorted that I receive. I've been trashed on both Breitbart and the Mary Sue, I'll have you know.
You have? Really?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone loves you,
then. I've been called a misogynist, and I've also been called SJW,
Oh, nice.
I tickle everyone where they don't like to be tickled.
Wow.
So, I don't know, I think, when I first wrote my first stuff, I had this was before the internet, really. It was before I was exposed to any idea of feminist critique or anything of that nature whatsoever.
Sure.
So I thought I was doing something incredibly clever by having a female character who was really aggressive and pleasant. I thought, wow, man, I'm pushing the boundaries here. And then as I was writing my third book, it became clear I maybe hadn't covered myself in the glory I had hoped as far as my female representation went. And I could do better. Yeah. And so since then, I have been continuing to try and sort of write a wider and more interesting array of women. And I think over time, I have started to become more successful at that.
Sure.
So I'm kind of pleased with the direction of travel. Of course, not everyone is ever going to be pleased with anything. But it's about pleasing yourself first. And hope others will come along, right?
Right. Yeah. I feel like, I grew up in the company of men mostly, and I always had tight groups of male friends, and I would that was how I was raised, and now I live completely in the company of women, and that's good for me. That's good. It's good for my writing. So I feel I've gotten better at writing female characters over time, and in defining strength as in considering other kinds of strength than just who's the most intimidating person in the room.
You don't have to just wedge the female character into the shape, the slot that the male character would occupy. You can do more different things.
Exactly, and giving a lot of range of play. Obviously, for male characters as well, you don't need everybody to be the toughest guy in the room. So I've had really good feedback, especially in the last 5-6 years. So maybe I've been flying under the radar of Breitbart and the Mary Sue. So someday, I too will.
You can be trashed and referred to as a literary sewer.
Nice, literary sewer, nice. I did have somebody from the Westboro Baptist Church here in America who was angry at me. So that was fun. But that's my claim.
Yeah.
A church of like 50 people.
I had someone who had to burn my book because they were concerned it would fall into the hands of their prayer group and corrupt them.
Oh,
which may be
nice.
Similar.
That's very powerful book there.
Powerful stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I think perhaps growing up when you and I did and reading the fantasy, that when we were in our teens and our early 20s, it was easy for a man to basically not read any female characters almost at all. I mean, or certainly a very repetitive and particular secondary sideline style of female character. I think women are totally expected to read books about women or about men, and that's completely fine and normal, where very few books will feature no men, no male characters. Pride and Prejudice has a lot of good male characters in it, even though you think of it as a female novel maybe, whereas men can easily just read fiction that's endlessly all about men all the time, especially maybe when we were growing up. So I think, as men, you also have that problem of not necessarily having been exposed to many women even on the page, let alone in real life, and that can be difficult. Right.
I mean, I adore Tolkien, and he did not have very many female characters. I read him over and over and over. Right? Yeah. Right. Oh yeah.
It's not a lot.
Not a lot. Not a lot. Yeah. If you're doing the voices and you're a dad, that's very nice because you don't have to try to do the girl voice.
Exactly.
But for other reasons,
dwarves.
Yes, right. It's lots of Scottish dwarves. Yeah, but yes, reading to one's daughter, you do sort of become aware of some of these things. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Should we see if we can find one last question? Since we are at the hour.
Oh God, we're at the hour.
We are, and we know nobody wants us to go long, so we will. Okay. Oh, that's a good one, but it's way too long. Okay.
How about this one? Would you two ever consider collaborating on a novel, similar to what Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett did? Who's Gaiman and who's Pratchett in this? In this duo? That's what I want to know.
Let's see. Let's consider it. No.
I mean, we have
perfect.
twice the profundity of Gaiman and twice the humour of Pratchett between us, obviously.
Oh man!
You know, this thing of sharing a novel, I would find that really strange. I'm not sure. In a way, I'd like to try it just because I can't imagine how it works. I mean, part of the joy of writing is that I can indulge my megalomaniac, venomous, ambitious side and not have to compromise with people on things. You know, it's painful enough having an editor, let alone a co-writer. Do you think it's something you could ever countenance?
I just feel like I would be awful to work with. You know, like because
I feel that about you as well.
Yes. It's like people who are really wonderful outliners. I could totally imagine working with somebody who's a wonderful outliner. Okay, this exactly has to happen, and you know where everything's going. That sounds easy. I'm sure it's not, but like me, I'm way too organic in my approach to things. I do run into the dead ends, and then I'll have the midnight brilliant thoughts, and I'll work till 4 a.m. or whatever. And so I feel like I'm all over the place. So I would be I wouldn't be treating my co-writer the way I would like to treat them. And so I feel I would probably be like racked with guilt at all times. And
maybe it needs to be a loose, long range relationship, rather than a marriage. Though maybe we're looking at it the wrong way. Maybe it's
right.
You got to look at it as a side
writing
piece,
marriage. Side piece.
Exactly. Yeah.
This metaphor, yes, but you've got to put out for your side piece is what I'm saying, and somewhat on the regular. So.
You've got to keep them interested.
Yes. So you heard it here. We are definitely collaborating.
I can't wait.
I
can't wait to get started. I got some exciting ideas, I think.
Okay, me too. All right.
I'll send you a plan.
Okay, perfect.
Chapters back.
Okay. Yes, exactly. How about I'll write it and you'll share the checks with me, right?
Exactly. I've got a brilliant idea. It's about this boy with a magic sword.
Okay. Oh, excellent.
And he's got to kill a dragon.
A 10-book series, 400,000 words each, published on a yearly schedule. Sounds perfect.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone. Thank you.
Just get back to me with the checks.
Right. Exactly. Perfect. Well, thanks all for coming, and I guess that's it for us today. Please. Sorry, this is supposed to be a sales pitch. So click the links, and those are wherever those are, and buy our books. I promise half of them are really good. So.
Oh yeah, we won't say which half. Towards the start of the alphabet there.
Brutal.
The shelf.
Brutal. All right.
But thank you all for coming. And sorry we couldn't get to more questions. Once you start talking, it just keeps going, doesn't it?
Man.
Maybe we'll do this again. It'd be good to do it again.
We could do this again. All right. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.